Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is sensing. We are sensual beings, meaning that we experience the world through our senses. And we've kind of had a narrow definition of what those senses might include. So today we get to explore a little bit more deeply what might be available to us in the world of sensing. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells and your organs, and bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating a brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel that tickling, the tingling, the sensation, the temperature, and allow that sensation, because that's what we're talking about today, allow that sensation to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a Monday. They just keep coming, right? Anyway, it's great to be here with you. And I so appreciate you, your presence and your engagement. If you are wanting to leave comments, please go to the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And if you leave comments there, I should be able to see them and respond to them. Hopefully I'll see them. And so we're talking about sensing today. We are sensual creatures. And that means that we are, the way that we interact with the world is through these marvelous physical bodies that we have that experience senses. And we're familiar with our standard 5 senses, right? Hearing, smelling, tasting, seeing, and feeling, like the tactile sensation. And we have a lot more sensitivities to be able to be interacting with than we're consciously aware of, or that we even have language for. And I think this is a really interesting topic, because once we start to put a name to things, it makes those things more readily accessible to us. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about sensing and how we experience the world. Good morning, Kimberly. Good morning, Lisa. So good to have you guys with us. Welcome. So we're talking about the way that we interact with the world and our ability to sense things. And we don't have language for the senses, typically for the senses that go beyond our standard 5 senses, right? So as a result of not having language for those things, we might tend to dismiss them or disregard them, not give them as much attention and credibility as they deserve. So, for example, when you're in a room and someone walks into the room that you don't see or hear, you can often feel that person's energy. You can feel the energy of the room shift. So what is it that we're feeling? You know, maybe, and I suspect this is quite true, we have the ability to sense electrical energy, magnetic energy. You know, we can experience differences in atmosphere. We can experience emotional energy. So we've all had those kinds of experiences, right? We've also probably all had those kinds of experiences where we think of someone and then the phone rings and it's them, right? Or we're calling somebody at the same time that they're calling us. There's something that we're sensing, that we're experiencing, that we might not have a conscious cognition about, that we might not have a conscious awareness that we're able to translate necessarily into language. But we pick things up, and the picking of things up is sensing. It's using some kind of mechanism that is available to us in our physicalness, in our physical manifestation. Like we have this incredible instrument, this phenomenal physical body that we often make an enemy of, right? We often feel like we're trapped in our bodies, or we're limited by our bodies, or we have complaints about our bodies. But meantime, we don't appreciate the fact that all of our experience is processed through our bodies, right? So when we look at our senses, you know, and another thing that we can be looking at is how we integrate information, how we experience information. One of the conversations that we have ongoingly together is that everything is feedback, and that includes our physicalness. You know, so if I'm feeling, all of a sudden I'm feeling no energy, that's feedback. That's maybe a communication. It's maybe a sensing into the environment. Perhaps our emotional states are sensing into the environment. It is a way that we are experiencing through our senses, through our physicalness. We're experiencing feedback or some kind of response to our situation or the information that's all around us. Lisa says, when my mom was sick, I would wake up suddenly in the middle of the night. Then I'd call her house and she'd be on her way to the ER. We were so connected. Beautiful example, Lisa. I'm sorry it was such a frightening one. But this is amazing, right? That we are connected. There's some kind of way that we're sensing this information, where that information is being communicated to us, right? It's the same kind of phenomena happens with mothers and babies, right? You just are very, very tuned to what is going on with this other being. And when we say that we're tuned, what does it mean? Like there's some way that we are putting out and receiving information. And I think, you know, just like we make an enemy of the ego. We often make an enemy of the body without recognizing the remarkable vehicle that it is for our experience of life. You know, like that we don't get to experience life without our physicalness, right? And that this manifestation is a remarkable and profoundly sensitive information receiving and delivery mechanism, right? Above at plus so many other things. But we limit our perception and relationship with our bodies by thinking that we have just five senses. And so an example, this is so interesting. Sometimes when I meditate, I don't know whether my eyes are open or closed. It's like I can see the room, and I don't, and it's dark, and I can see the room, and I really don't know are my eyes open or closed, because I'm seeing it I'm seeing the same thing whether my eyes are open or closed. And it's not just seeing the room, but I'm sometimes I experience seeing patterns, and it doesn't matter whether my eyes are open or closed. Those patterns are there. And so there's another, and it's in darkness. So there's another means of sight, you know, when also people talk about second sight, you know, where people envision things before they happen, or can envision something that's happening someplace else. These are senses. And I think when we legitimize the capacity and the capabilities that we have with our senses, then we can begin to gain a more aware access to those experiences that might seem or might be other dimensional. So I think this is a really interesting way to start to think about aspects of what it is to be human in this manifest physical form. We often think about, you know, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, and we often contextualize that as a limitation, you know, like we talk about the limitations of our physical experience without recognizing the expansiveness of our physical experience, without acknowledging what's available to us through this remarkable physical experience. And so I was watching some YouTube videos this morning about where a mathematician physicist was talking about the nature of consciousness, and how, you know, when we talk about or think about AI, artificial intelligence, we talk about artificial intelligence becoming sentient, you know, becoming independently thinking and feeling, you know, through some kind of leap of perception. And from what I understood, although, you know, I didn't get to see the whole thing yet, this guy was talking about how consciousness is not computational. that there's an element of understanding that transcends computation, which I thought was really interesting. And he was talking about how consciousness has a quantum aspect to it. And I think when we talk about our senses, what happens is that there's a synthesis of information that occurs that transcends the input, that we get all this input, and then there's a synthesis, I can't think of a better word at the moment, or a synergy that happens that then becomes greater than the sum of the parts. It's kind of like when you take all these ingredients like flour and butter and eggs and liquid, and all of us, you put it all together, it becomes a cake, which is something beyond anything of the individual ingredients, right? So it's like all this sensual input gets put in a pot, and somehow consciousness synthesizes it into something more. But I like the idea. I think it's very interesting for us to be considering the richness of what's available to us through our sensing mechanism. So our brains receive all kinds of stimulus, like billions of bits of information. And what our brain does is it sorts and grabs a very limited subset of all that information. And what if we gained access to more of that information, or a different subset? Our experience would be radically, radically different. And so it seems to me, or an expanded set, seems to me that as we identify more senses, as we identify our ability to access all kinds of other information on all kinds of other levels, that we then can gain greater access to that information and create new synthesis, because we keep talking about creating the future, creating from the future rather than creating from the past. We were talking last week about being willing to forget who we are, being willing to extract ourselves from the knowing of ourselves that we have cultivated over time in order to create something truly new. So Rosalind says, when does a thought become a belief? Absent evidence, like waking from a dream, waking up knowing, or being guided to take action. Wow, two different conversations, at least in that conversation, Rosalind. So when does a thought become a belief? That's an interesting conversation in and of itself. Good morning, Bernadette. Welcome. So good to have you here with us. So, like, the idea of belief, we tend to identify with our beliefs and believe that they're unchangeable, and we typically believe they're truth rather than beliefs and constructs. So that's an interesting thing. When does a thought become a belief, and when does a belief change? That's a great conversation, maybe for another day. But then like waking from a dream, waking up knowing, or being guided to take action. So that's where, again, I think that conversation goes into the arena of senses, that we are, what is a sense? If we can maybe define senses as a way to be receiving information, good, bad, indifferent, we're receiving information, then we could be receiving it. We often do, in fact, receive information in altered states, like a sleep state. And so we might wake up with clarity about something. We may wake up with guidance about something when we're in meditation. We can access different states of consciousness. It's interesting because part of that is often going beyond the body, or at least in our imagination, going beyond the body. It may be that what we're doing is we're accessing different capacities of the body, right? We're activating maybe the pineal gland or whatever, but it's still working within this physical form to navigate different dimensions of being and awareness and information and consciousness. And I just think that if we can reframe our relationship to the body, to recognize it as this remarkable tuning device, and to be extolling its virtues rather than trying to separate ourselves from it, but to be finding our way into empowering it and being empowered in it, resident in it, embodied in it, that maybe we can access its greater gifts, because it is our vehicle. Even if you're meditating and you're fasting and you're doing all these things to deny the body or transcend the body, the fact is that you're still in the body, right? And I imagine that a number of us have experienced astral travel, right? So that's the experience of being outside the body. And somehow there's a mechanism of the body that enables that kind of thing too. So, right, it's very interesting, just offering a different experience. So Bernadette says, I think dreams are a reflection of our own thoughts and experiences. I'm inclined to agree with you, Bernadette, that dreams are another way that we can communicate with ourselves and the universe, and it may be a two-way communication, or a multi-way communication. But I think that as we recognize that our experience is channeled through this vehicle, that it's not a burden. We may experience it as burdensome when we have physical complaints, or where our body is too big or too small or too tired or too whatever. However, what happens if we put our attention on the appreciation for the experience that we have, like that we wouldn't be having any experience without the body, right? That we would be able to identify all of our experience is a function of our physicalness in some capacity. So Bernadette says, and then there's the other side of a spiritual journey with another, or is it just a conversation of what we really want to hear? And then there is the other side of a spiritual journey with another, or is it just a conversation of what we really want to hear? I'm not quite sure how to understand your question, Bernadette. If we're talking about a spiritual journey with another person, if we're talking about engaging with other people, again, that is something that is funneled through this physical form, right? So I don't know that we get to escape it. I mean, yes, maybe astral projection is being outside our body, but even that is referential, right? Because what we're experiencing in contrast to being in our body. Most of us aren't even really in our bodies. Most of us are dissociated and disconnected. I wonder what would happen if we were really able to embody ourselves and harness the incredible magic available to us through the physicalness. Like there's a way of being, I believe, in the physical that allows us to kind of transcend the physical at the same time, like to be in this kind of interspace somehow. So Kimberly says, how do we really channel in? I feel sometimes I know I have it. I think that that's really the question, Kimberly, is like, how do we really go deeply into our bodies to really embody our experience? Oh, Bernadette, I got you, talking with people who have passed. So I think that that's another way of sensing, you know, that just may be another sense to be able to tune in to other information. And so back to Kimberly's question is, how do we really channel in? How do we really tune in to that experience? And it's such a great question, because I know that for myself, I'm filtering out lots of information, probably way, way, way more. And I think this is everybody. You know, it's the idea that we can only function with a certain number of bytes and bits, you know, of information that are coming in, and that all this information is being recorded somehow into our physical being on some level. But consciously, we're only capturing a small fraction. So maybe as we more deeply embody, we're able to connect with more of that information. So for instance, talking with people who have passed, there's energy. There's energy that we can connect with. When we do it all the time on all different levels, it's just a matter of recognizing that it's available, perhaps, as a first step, you know, like that it's not something separate from ourselves. Maybe it just has to do with allowing ourselves to expand our receptivity, you know, to expand, to say, oh, okay, I know that's out there. What would it feel like to tune in? And then maybe just sort of imagine yourself as a radio station or a radio tuning into different frequencies. You know, and it occurs to me that that could be a really effective tool to just close your eyes and recognize that we have this whole big spectrum of frequency that we can tune into through this device, this amazing physical device. And so there's a perhaps some refinement that we can make to this physicalness, rather than believing in its limitation, to believe in its capacities and capabilities. Kimberly says, I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you. That's awesome. I'm having fun with it. I hope you are too. I mean, I think as we acknowledge that it's available and that we each have it, and it's just a matter of gently tuning in and paying attention, that there's a lot more that's going to be available. Maybe it's not going to be for the specific person you want to connect to, but as we tune in, you know, there's going to be a lot more available to us. So for instance, in I hear a lot of sound all the time, tinnitus, but it's beyond that. Like I hear a lot of sound all the time. And I imagine that if I were able to just tune in more deeply, that sound might, rather than being this white noise, gray noise, that there might be information that's gleanable from that. Who knows? So that's something that I play with. So Lisa says we all have an intuitive ability, as well as the ability to talk to people on the other side. But like most things, you kind of have to work at it. You have to listen to yourself and trust your gut. I find if I ground and center, I'm able to quiet my mind enough to hear. You can ask your archangels to help bring it in. Thank you for that, Lisa. That was really beautiful guidance. And that's really what we're talking about, is tuning in with awareness and acknowledgement that it's available, that it's there. And maybe when we tune in without the specific demand, like I want to be able to connect to so-and-so, or, sometimes being that specific can be of support. It's like, okay, here I'm tuning the radio into that station. What would it be like if I were tuned in? What might I hear? And then the thing is that we often disbelieve the information that we get. It's like, oh, I'm just making that up. I've heard so many times people saying, I'm just making it up. Well, what is just making it up? When we get these sparks of inspiration, are they originating from us, or are we tuning into something that is existent outside of us and possibly independent of us? So I think that the foundation is to just be recontextualizing the way that we're interacting with our knowingness or with the information. We've been taught to discount so much by saying, oh, you're just making that up, right? From the time we're little. You didn't really see that. You just made it up. Oh, it's your imaginary friend kind of thing, right? When in fact, we might have been tuning into something greater. And so we get to be more willing to observe and to receive without judgment. Then there's more possibility, I think, that things are going to come in. And it's really what you're saying, Lisa, is quiet my mind enough to hear, is suspending judgment and all that conversation of I can't do this, or I made it up, or I don't know how, or it's just being able to be present to information, to bring awareness to it. I think that that's kind of what it's about. So anyway, talking about senses and what happens when we really come to our senses. It may be that the senses that we have give us the capacity to have a universal consciousness. And in opening to those senses, what we're doing is creating the perfect alchemy between the physical, the metaphysical, the spiritual, right? All of that. And we get to create physical magic in this plane as we really embody ourselves in the physical, rather than perpetuating the separation that we've had from it. So Rosalind says, moving into inviting info, being curious, and wonderment. Wonder is my favorite, Rosalind. Beauty and wonder. And that leads me to love and open-heartedness and my experience of God. So thank you for that. Curiosity and wonderment. And Kimberly says, believe we're magical, open heart and mind. Exactly. And part of it has to do with not dividing ourselves from ourselves, not separating ourselves from our physicalness. we have villainized the ego and we have villainized the body. And what happens if we, because we created these separations, what if we bring it all together? What power might be available to us? And what revelation? So with that, what a fun morning. Thanks, guys. I so appreciate it. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page at 9 a.m. Eastern. I am so grateful for our time together. I can't even tell you. So I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, Enlightened World Living, EWN One with the Earth. And until next time, Dido, thanks. It was so good to have you here with us. And until next time, so much love. Take care.